The human expedition ship, Aurora's Light, floated above the alien world of Valoria like a small shadow against a giant blue moon. Valoria was famous across the stars for its shining palaces, endless crimson forests, and its people, the Valorians, tall, elegant beings with pale skin, sharp eyes, and a presence that carried both beauty and danger. Most humans only heard rumors about them. Some said they lived for centuries. Others whispered that they were cold and proud, rulers who saw other species as beneath them. For Daniel Carter, none of those stories mattered. He was not a diplomat or a soldier. He was a quiet engineer, someone who preferred fixing broken machines to standing in the middle of politics. He had joined the expedition because he wanted to see the stars, not to become part of history, but fate had other plans. The crew of Aurora's Light was invited to a grand royal gathering in the palace city of Lutherial. The humans were told it was a ceremony of tradition, where the emperor would show hospitality to visiting envoys. Daniel did not expect to be chosen for the honor, yet when the mission leader asked for volunteers to attend, he found himself among the group. He tried to keep to the back as they entered the Hall of Eternal Flame, a chamber so massive that it made Earth's cathedrals look like simple houses. Towering pillars rose into golden arches, and every surface shone with carvings that told stories of battles, victories, and ancient rulers. Valorian nobles filled the hall, dressed in flowing garments that glittered under the light of floating lanterns. Their gazes were sharp, measuring as if each human was an insect under glass. Daniel stayed close to the wall, hoping to remain unnoticed. He wore the plain uniform of his mission, nothing special, and he kept his hands behind his back to stop them from fidgeting. The mission commander greeted the emperor with formal words. The humans bowed. The Valorians did not. At the far end of the hall, seated on a throne of crystal and black stone, was the emperor himself. He was tall, his skin pale as moonlight, his eyes red like burning coals. He looked at the humans with an expression that was not anger but not kindness either, more like a scientist studying creatures from another world. Beside him stood his daughter, Princess Saralith. She was unlike anyone Daniel had ever seen. Her beauty was sharp and soft at the same time, like sunlight on ice. She carried herself with calm power, her dark hair flowing over silver armor like robes. But it was her eyes that caught Daniel. They were not cold. They were searching. The ceremony went on with endless words of politics, alliances, trade agreements, and promises of peace. Daniel's attention drifted to the palace walls where strange machines ticked softly, powered by energies he did not understand. He made quiet notes in his mind about how the mechanisms worked. That was the kind of thing he liked. Quiet, simple, and far away from attention. Then, everything changed. When the emperor asked his daughter to step forward, silence filled the hall. The princess raised her hand slowly, her gaze sweeping over the gathered humans. Every noble leaned closer, waiting for her words. Her finger pointed at Daniel. "I choose him," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I want this human as my husband." The hall exploded into gasps and shouts. Valorian nobles stood in outrage. Some placed their hands over their chests in disbelief. Others hissed words of protest. The emperor's expression turned dark, his eyes narrowing. Daniel froze. His heart stopped for a moment and he looked behind himself, certain she must mean someone else. But her gaze did not move. She was pointing at him. "Wait, what?" Daniel whispered, though no one could hear him in the storm of voices. The mission commander looked as shocked as Daniel felt. He tried to speak, to explain that there must be a mistake, but the nobles drowned out his words. One shouted, "A human? Fragile and weak." Another cried, "Unworthy of Valorian blood." The emperor raised his hand and silence fell like a heavy curtain. His voice was low, but it carried across the hall. "Saralith, explain yourself." The princess did not look away. "Father, I have seen enough of noble suitors. They boast of power and honor, yet their hearts are hollow. This human—" She paused, her eyes resting on Daniel again. "He is quiet. He does not push himself forward. That is why I choose him. He is different, and I believe my destiny lies with him." Daniel's mouth went dry. He wanted to protest, to say he was just an engineer, that he had no place in this world of crowns and thrones. But words refused to leave his lips. The emperor's glare turned toward Daniel. Step forward, human. Daniel's legs felt like stone, but somehow he moved. The entire hall watched as he walked toward the throne. His mind raced with questions. Why him? What did she see? And what would happen if he said no? When he stopped before the Emperor, the ruler studied him with eyes like fire. Then he leaned back slowly. You are no warrior. You are no noble. Why should I allow this foolish choice? Daniel swallowed hard. I don't know, sir, he admitted honestly. His voice shook, but his words were plain. I didn't ask for this. I'm just an engineer, but if the princess believes I can be something more, then I won't disrespect her by saying no. The hall murmured again. Some nobles scoffed, others frowned, but a few watched Daniel with new interest. The Emperor's gaze lingered on him, unreadable. Finally he said, very well. If my daughter insists, you will be tested. If you fail, you will be sent back to your ship in shame. If you succeed, we will see. The princess's lips curved into the faintest smile, as if she had already known the answer. Later, as the humans were escorted out of the hall, Daniel walked in silence, his heart pounding louder than his footsteps. His fellow crew members whispered around him, some with disbelief, others with nervous laughter. But Daniel felt none of it. His mind was on the princess, on the strange spark in her eyes and the heavy weight her words had placed on his shoulders. He had come to Valoria to fix broken machines. Now he was caught in something much larger, something he did not understand. And somewhere deep inside he knew his life would never be the same again. The palace of Lutheriel was like nothing Daniel had ever seen. Its walls shimmered with faint moving light, and the floors were polished so perfectly that the reflections of the people walking seemed to float. The air smelled of sweet spices mixed with something metallic, an aroma that was both strange and comforting. Daniel had spent his life fixing machines and exploring human cities, but this was a world unlike anything he could imagine. The mission leader and his team were led through grand halls and spiral staircases, each more impressive than the last. Daniel tried to take in every detail, noting the odd symbols etched into the floors, the small devices hovering near the walls, and the subtle energy hum that seemed to flow through the palace itself. He kept his hands behind his back, walking carefully, not wanting to offend the Valorians with an accidental misstep. At last, they arrived in a room where the princess awaited him. Saralith stood near a large window that looked out over a garden of glowing trees. The sunlight, or whatever alien light filtered through the thick atmosphere, fell on her silver hair and made her look almost ethereal. She didn't smile, but there was a calm in her eyes that seemed to reach out to him. Sit, she said simply, gesturing to a chair opposite her. Daniel obeyed. His hands trembled slightly as he lowered himself into the seat. He had faced technical failures and unexpected explosions back on Earth, but nothing had prepared him for this. You are quiet, the princess said, her voice gentle but direct. Most humans are loud. Most people try too hard to impress. But you observe. You think. You do not speak without reason. That is why I chose you. Daniel opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Finally he managed, I am honored, princess. But I am not sure I understand. Why me? Saralith's eyes did not waver. I do not choose for reasons of power nor for wealth. I choose for instinct, for understanding, for the unseen qualities that others do not notice. You have a strength that is quiet yet real. You adapt. You think. That is what this world needs. Daniel could only nod. He had spent so long in his mechanical world dealing with logic and certainty that this was almost overwhelming, and yet something about her words made him feel capable, as if she truly believed he could be more than he thought. Over the next days, Daniel was introduced to the palace. He met servants who moved silently across the floors, carrying objects that seemed to float as they walked. He saw libraries filled with books that glowed faintly, each one older than any text he had ever seen. He noticed guards practicing combat techniques that combined elegance with deadly precision, yet he also saw moments of laughter, of camaraderie. The palace was not just a fortress, it was a living world. Daniel was also introduced to the Emperor. The man was tall and imposing, his red eyes piercing and unyielding. Daniel bowed deeply, trying to show respect, though he felt small in comparison. You are far from home, the Emperor said, his voice deep. You do not belong here. And yet my daughter has chosen you. That is dangerous, not only for you, but for her and for this empire. I will do my best, Daniel said quietly. I am only a human. but I will try to understand your world." The Emperor studied him for a long moment. Finally, he said, "You will undergo trials. They will test your courage, your mind, and your character. Pass them, and perhaps you will be worthy of my daughter. Fail, and you will return to your ship." Daniel's stomach twisted. He had faced technical challenges, even physical dangers back on Earth, but political trials, social expectations, tests that could cost his life, and yet a spark of determination grew inside him. If he failed, it would not just be personal shame. He would disappoint the princess who had placed her faith in him. The first trial was simple in appearance, a test of observation and understanding. The princess led him into a room filled with machinery unlike anything he had seen. Pipes ran in strange patterns and small devices whirred and clicked, responding to invisible signals. "Understand this system," she said, her gaze steady. "You have 1 hour. If you fail, you leave this palace." Daniel stepped forward. He examined the machinery, noting the patterns, the rhythms, the way the energy pulsed through each component. Slowly, he began to make sense of it. His human intuition, honed over years of fixing machines, told him what each part was likely to do. When he adjusted one device slightly, the whole system began to hum in perfect synchronization. The lights aligned and the machines responded as if they had been waiting for him. Saralith's eyes softened. "You see what others cannot. That is why I chose you." Daniel exhaled, relief washing over him. This was just the first step, and yet he felt a small surge of confidence. Maybe he could do this. Over the next days, Daniel faced more challenges. Some were physical, testing his endurance and agility. He was not the strongest, but he learned to use his wits. When he had to navigate a complex obstacle course, he observed the patterns, anticipated the movements of guards and machinery, and used timing instead of brute force to succeed. Other trials were social, testing his understanding of Valorian culture. The nobles tried to provoke him, asking insulting questions or presenting situations designed to confuse and humiliate. At first, Daniel stumbled. He did not understand all the subtleties, but slowly he learned to read expressions, to notice the small gestures that revealed intention. He began to respond calmly, politely, yet with a quiet strength that surprised even the Valorians. Through it all, Saralith watched him. She did not interfere. She let him succeed or fail on his own. But there were moments when her eyes met his, offering silent encouragement. Daniel found that he could not stop thinking about her. The calm power, the quiet confidence, the strange kindness in her gaze. One evening, after a long day of trials, Daniel walked through the palace gardens. The glowing trees cast gentle light and the air smelled sweet and fresh. He found Saralith sitting by a fountain, her reflection shimmering in the water. "You are improving," she said quietly. "The others are beginning to notice. Some are curious, some are angry, but all are watching. You may be the first human to earn respect here." Daniel hesitated. "I don't know if I deserve it. I'm just trying." "That is enough," she said. "Many in this world are born with power, with authority, and yet they fail because they do not understand. You are learning. You are observing. You are adapting. That is strength." Daniel smiled faintly. For the first time since arriving, he felt a sense of belonging. Not complete belonging. He was still a stranger in this alien world, but a spark of hope that he could survive, perhaps even thrive. But palace life was not without danger. Daniel began to notice whispers in the corridors, fleeting glances from nobles who muttered when they thought he could not hear. Some clearly resented the princess's choice. He heard rumors of secret alliances forming, of nobles who believed humans were weak and undeserving. Daniel shared some of his concerns with Saralith. She nodded but did not show fear. "There will always be those who resist change," she said. "We must be careful, but we will face it together." "I trust you," her words strengthened him. Daniel realized that he was no longer merely surviving. He was becoming part of something bigger. His skills, his courage, and his understanding of others mattered here in a way they had never mattered on Earth. By the end of the week, Daniel had passed several trials. The nobles still whispered, some openly mocking, but many had begun to respect him, or at least to reconsider their assumptions. The Emperor remained stern and watchful, but even he seemed to acknowledge that Daniel was more than a simple human. Daniel stood beside Saralith on the balcony overlooking the city. The sky was a swirl of violet and gold, and the palace lights sparkled like stars. I never thought I'd be here, he admitted. I'm just an engineer, and yet, everything feels different now. Saralith smiled, a rare and genuine smile. You are exactly where you are meant to be, and we have much work ahead. But I believe in you. Daniel looked at the city below, the palace, the people, and finally at the princess. For the first time, he felt a sense of purpose that went beyond circuits and machines. He was part of something extraordinary, and he knew that whatever challenges came next, he would face them, not as a human alone, but with the princess at his side. The palace of Lutheriel was no longer just a place of wonder. It was now his world too. Daniel had begun to feel at home in the Valorian palace, yet a quiet tension hung in the air. The whispers of nobles and the occasional glances full of suspicion reminded him that he was still an outsider. He was not blind to the fact that many considered his presence an insult to tradition. Still, he had earned the princess's trust, and that gave him a confidence he had never known. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the city of Lutheriel, Daniel walked through the quiet corridors of the palace. His footsteps echoed softly on the polished floors. The glow from the walls bathed the hall in soft light, creating long shadows. He had been summoned by Saralith for a private discussion, but as he approached the library, he noticed movement near the corner of the hallway. Two cloaked figures slipped through the shadows, their faces hidden beneath dark hoods. Curiosity overcame caution. Daniel followed at a distance, keeping low and careful. The figures stopped near a doorway that led to a private chamber. He couldn't hear their words clearly, but he caught fragments. The human. The princess cannot marry him. He must be removed. Daniel froze. Assassins or spies? His heart pounded. He had known palace life was dangerous, but now he understood the stakes. The rebellion was real, and it was targeting him. He retreated silently, taking careful note of the direction the figures had gone. He knew he could not confront them alone, not yet, but he had to warn the princess. When he found Saralith, she was seated near the central fountain of the palace garden, her expression calm yet thoughtful. Daniel approached, trying to control the adrenaline rushing through his veins. "Princess," he whispered urgently, "there's a plot. Some nobles. They're planning something against us. I overheard them." Saralith's eyes sharpened, but her voice remained steady. "You are certain I am?" "They were speaking of removing me and—" Daniel paused, unsure how much to say. "They might strike during the lunar festival. It's only days away." The princess rose and walked to the edge of the fountain, her reflection shimmering in the water. "I expected opposition," she said quietly. "Many in the court cannot accept a human as my husband. But if they plan violence, we must act carefully. You must not confront them alone." Daniel nodded, his mind racing. "What should I do?" "Observe," she instructed. "Gather information. Learn who they are and report to me. We will plan together. Your mind is your strength, Daniel. Use it." For the first time, Daniel realized that his human ingenuity, his quiet observation and logical thinking, was as valuable here as his courage. Over the next days, Daniel moved cautiously through the palace. He watched nobles closely, noting their alliances, listening for whispered conversations and observing meetings that seemed secretive. He saw subtle signs of rebellion, doors left unlocked for certain visitors, notes exchanged in silence, guards occasionally taking orders from someone other than the Emperor's command. It was a dangerous game. One wrong step and his presence could be discovered. But Daniel relied on what he had learned in his human life, paying attention to patterns, predicting behavior, and using small devices he carried to record evidence. One afternoon, he overheard a group of nobles in the west wing of the palace. They spoke openly of removing the princess's trust in him, of presenting false evidence that he was unworthy and dangerous. One noble, with a scar across his cheek, mentioned a weapon hidden in the palace tunnels, an ancient Valorian device that could harm anyone it touched. Daniel's stomach tightened. This was serious. The festival was in 3 days. He returned to Saralith immediately, breathless. "They have a weapon hidden. They plan to strike during the festival. We need to find it before then." The princess nodded, her expression steady. "We will need more than courage," she said. "We will need strategy." Daniel and Saralith began a careful search of the palace. They moved silently through hidden corridors, relying on Daniel's human intuition to identify unusual spaces. Saralith used her knowledge of the palace's architecture and the subtle energy currents that ran through its walls to detect anomalies. Finally, in a shadowed corridor beneath the royal gardens, they discovered a small chamber. Inside was the weapon, a device of intricate metal and glowing crystal humming softly. Daniel examined it carefully. "This is dangerous," he said. "It's designed to respond to blood or maybe life energy. If it's activated during the festival, no one will survive." Saralith's eyes glimmered. "We will disable it. Together." Using Daniel's human engineering knowledge and Saralith's understanding of Valorian energy, they worked to neutralize the weapon. It was delicate work, one mistake could trigger it, but their combined skills succeeded. The humming ceased and the crystal dimmed. Daniel exhaled, relief flooding him. "That was too close," he said quietly. Saralith smiled faintly. "You did well. You did more than survive today. You proved that your strength is not in your arms, but in your mind. That is why I chose you." The lunar festival arrived with a mix of celebration and tension. The palace was decorated with glowing banners, intricate light displays, and flowers that seemed to move with the wind. Nobles and citizens of Valoria filled the streets and gardens, their eyes bright with excitement. Daniel walked alongside Saralith, blending into the festivities while keeping watch. He noticed a few nobles casting suspicious glances, but their plans were already foiled. The weapon was gone and their plot had lost momentum. Still, the threat remained. Daniel remained vigilant, using every trick he had learned to predict potential dangers. During the festival, the Emperor gave a public speech, praising unity and loyalty. Saralith stood by his side, radiating calm authority. Daniel could see the pride in her eyes as she glanced at him briefly. He realized that their partnership was no longer just about survival. It was a bond built on trust and respect. Later, as the festival reached its peak, a sudden commotion erupted near the central plaza. A small group of nobles attempted to create chaos, hoping to frame Daniel and the princess. But Daniel acted quickly. Using knowledge of the palace layout, he guided Saralith and loyal guards to intercept the group before they could harm anyone. The rebels were stopped without serious injury, their plot exposed publicly. The Emperor's voice thundered across the plaza, condemning their actions and reaffirming his daughter's choice. "The human you see before you has shown courage, wisdom, and loyalty. Those who question him will answer for their treachery." The nobles were silenced. Some bowed reluctantly, others cast angry glances. But the court understood that Daniel was no longer a simple human outsider. He had proven himself. After the festival, Daniel and Saralith stood on a balcony overlooking the city. The glow of the moons reflected in the waters below, and the air was filled with music and laughter. Daniel felt a sense of pride, but also a deep awareness of the challenges still ahead. "You have done more than survive," Saralith said. "You have shown that a human can rise above expectations. That is why I trust you." Daniel smiled faintly. "I never imagined I would be doing this, walking through a palace, stopping rebellion, standing by an alien princess. But I feel like I belong here." Saralith placed a hand on his shoulder. "You do. And together we will face whatever comes next. The court, the nobles, the galaxy itself. Nothing can stop us if we work as one." Daniel looked at the city below, at the palace, and finally at Saralith. He realized that life had changed forever. From a quiet engineer, he had become someone who mattered. Someone whose mind, courage, and heart could shape the fate of two worlds. The shadows of rebellion had been exposed. But the journey was far from over. The palace, the nobles, and the galaxy beyond would challenge him again. Yet Daniel knew he was ready. With Saralith by his side, he could face anything. And as the twin moons shone overhead, Daniel understood that his life, once quiet and ordinary, had become extraordinary. The human had become more than an observer. He had become a part of history. The peace after the festival was short-lived. Though Daniel had earned respect from many nobles, there were still those who refused to accept a human beside the princess. A few of the more daring conspirators had fled the palace, taking their plans and weapons with them into the galaxy. They were not content to plot quietly. They would strike openly. It began with reports of rebel fleets gathering near the outer systems of Valoria. Daniel was briefed by Saralith in the palace war room, a vast chamber filled with floating maps and data screens. Ships of all sizes moved across holographic space, glowing lines showing potential attack routes. "They plan to invade the capital," Saralith said, her voice calm but firm. "They seek to destabilize the Empire, to discredit me and remove the human from my side. Daniel leaned closer to the map. His eyes scanned the movement of ships, noting patterns and weaknesses. They're using outdated navigation codes, he said. If we can anticipate their routes, we can set traps. They won't expect it. Saralith nodded. Then you will help plan the defense. I trust your judgment, Daniel. The Emperor, who had been silent during much of the briefing, finally spoke. Human, you have proven yourself in the palace. Now you will prove yourself in war. Your ideas may save us or they may fail. Choose carefully. Daniel swallowed. The responsibility was enormous. On Earth, he had designed small devices and repaired equipment, but now he was being asked to plan the defense of an entire planet and empire. Yet he also realized that his human perspective, his ability to think differently, was exactly what they needed. The first move came without warning. Scout ships detected a rebel fleet approaching at high speed, trying to bypass the main defense grid. Saralith and Daniel worked together to deploy a counter-strategy. Using Daniel's suggestions, the Valorian forces modified their energy barriers and weapon systems to create traps along the rebel ship's predicted path. The battle began with sudden flashes in the dark space around Valoria. Ships fired bright pulses of energy, streaking across the void like shooting stars. The rebels expected the Valorians to fight conventionally, but Daniel's plans were different. Defensive satellites opened and closed in sequence, forcing the attackers into a maze of fire. From the command center, Daniel watched with intense focus. Adjust the pulse sequence by 3 milliseconds, he shouted. The Valorian officers obeyed and the enemy ships faltered, colliding with each other or being trapped in energy fields. Saralith stood beside him, her hands moving gracefully across controls, directing Valorian ships with precision. Well done, she said. You are not just a human, you are a strategist. Daniel felt a small swell of pride, but there was no time to celebrate. The battle had only begun. As the main rebel fleet approached, the Emperor assigned Daniel a team of elite pilots and engineers. They worked quickly, using human ingenuity to improve Valorian weaponry and adapt old technology in new ways. Daniel suggested modifications to energy shields, guidance systems, and even the design of smaller attack ships, allowing them to maneuver in ways Valorians had never attempted. During the battle, Daniel also witnessed Saralith in action. She piloted a Valorian cruiser with astonishing skill, leading attacks, protecting weaker ships, and inspiring her forces with her courage. Daniel realized that while his mind solved problems, her leadership and bravery gave the fleet its soul. The battle raged for hours. Bright streaks of light and explosions filled the viewports of the command ships. Daniel's strategies worked, but not perfectly. There were losses, and every decision carried weight. Yet the rebels, confident in their superiority, began to falter against the unexpected tactics of the human Valorian alliance. In the heat of battle, a warning alarm blared. A group of rebels had broken through the outer defenses and were approaching the palace itself. Daniel's heart pounded. They are trying to attack the palace directly, he shouted. Saralith's expression hardened. Then we stop them here, she said. Lead me to the fastest ships. We end this threat together. Daniel coordinated with the fastest Valorian cruisers, forming a blockade in the path of the intruders. He guided the ships using a combination of timing, energy pulses, and unpredictable maneuvers. The rebels fired continuously, but the strategy worked. The palace remained protected, and several enemy ships were captured. As they prepared to finish the engagement, Daniel noticed a small rebel ship attempting to escape. They might be carrying critical intelligence, he said. We need to capture it. Saralith's eyes met his. Then we will. Together they pursued the vessel. The chase led them through asteroid fields and dense energy storms. Saralith's piloting skill and Daniel's precise calculations allowed them to corner the ship. With a well-timed maneuver, they disabled its engines without harming the crew, capturing valuable information about the rebel plans. After hours of fighting, the rebel fleet began to retreat. The Valorian forces, guided by Daniel's strategies and Saralith's leadership, had won a decisive victory. The Emperor declared the defense a triumph, praising both the princess and the human who had proven himself in battle. In the aftermath, Daniel walked through the palace gardens, the weight of the day heavy on his shoulders. Saralith joined him, her expression thoughtful. You were magnificent, she said softly, not just in battle, but in every decision. You think differently, and that is what saved us. Daniel shook his head. I only followed the best path I could see. But you were incredible. Without your courage and leadership, nothing I did would have mattered. Saralith smiled faintly. Perhaps that is what makes us a team. Different strengths working together. The court is beginning to see that. Humans are not weak. They are different, and that can be powerful. Daniel felt a warmth in his chest. The journey from engineer to strategist, from observer to participant in a galaxy-scale war had changed him. And yet, he realized this was only the beginning. In the days following the battle, the court slowly adjusted. Nobles who had plotted rebellion were punished or exiled. Loyalists praised Daniel and Saralith, their trust in the human growing. The Emperor, once skeptical, acknowledged that Daniel had proven his worth, not through physical strength, but through intelligence, courage, and loyalty. Yet even in victory, Daniel knew challenges remained. The galaxy was vast, and there were other forces watching, waiting, and perhaps plotting. He also understood that the path to being worthy of Saralith's trust and of Valorian respect was ongoing. He had proven himself in this battle, but the trials of politics, culture, and leadership would continue. One night, as he stood beside Saralith on a balcony overlooking the city, Daniel gazed at the stars. He thought of Earth, his quiet life there, and the strange twist of fate that had brought him here. I never imagined my life would be like this, he admitted. Saralith's hand rested lightly on his shoulder. None of us know where destiny will lead, she said, but we face it together.
Your mind, your courage, and your heart.
They matter more than you realize. Daniel looked at her, the realization settling in fully. He was no longer just a human outsider. He had become part of something greater, a defender of a world, a partner to a princess, a mind capable of influencing the outcome of battles and the fate of entire peoples. And as the twin moons reflected off the palace waters, Daniel understood that this war had taught him not just strategy, but something far more important: trust, courage, and the power of unity. The stars above were quiet, but Daniel knew the galaxy would never be the same for him. The human had become a strategist, a protector, and someone who could stand beside the greatest leaders of Valoria. The war had been won, but the journey was far from over. New challenges awaited, new threats, and new opportunities for Daniel and Saralith to prove that their bond, human and Valorian, was not weakness, but strength. Together they would face the next challenge, ready to defend the Empire, their people, and the fragile peace they had earned. The galaxy was quiet, but the peace felt fragile. The battle against the rebel fleet had ended, yet Daniel knew that threats would always linger. The Valorian Empire had survived thanks to strategy, courage, and unity. But the real challenge was rebuilding trust and ensuring lasting stability. Daniel walked through the palace corridors, observing the repairs and preparations after the conflict. Cracks from energy blasts had been carefully mended, and servants moved silently, placing decorations and cleaning the halls. The city outside sparkled under the twin moons, alive and vibrant. Yet behind the beauty, Daniel sensed the lingering tension of those who still questioned his presence. He paused as Saralith joined him. "The Empire is safe," she said, her voice calm but firm. "The Emperor and most nobles acknowledge your role now, but there are still those who will test your worth and ours. Do you feel ready?" Daniel nodded. "I think I do. I've learned more in these weeks than I ever imagined. I understand more about Valorian life, their people, their ways. I know the path ahead is not easy, but I want to face it with you." Her lips curved in a faint smile. "Then we move forward, together." The Emperor called a council to discuss the future of the Empire. Nobles, generals, and trusted advisors gathered in the Hall of Eternal Flame. Daniel and Saralith entered side by side, an unusual but accepted sight now. Some nobles still looked skeptical, but many bowed respectfully, acknowledging the human who had defended the Empire with wit and courage. The Emperor spoke first. "The recent rebellion has reminded us that the Empire's strength lies not only in power, but in unity and intelligence. Today we recognize the contributions of all who protect Valoria, regardless of origin." He paused, his red eyes scanning the assembly. This human, Daniel Carter, has proven himself through action, strategy, and loyalty. He is no longer an outsider. He is part of Valoria. Daniel felt his heart beat faster. The words of acceptance coming from the Emperor himself carried more weight than any award or title. It was a recognition that he could contribute, that his presence mattered. Saralith placed a hand lightly on his arm. "You have earned this," she said softly. Rebuilding the Empire was a slow process. Daniel worked alongside Valorian engineers, blending human technology with Valorian energy systems. He suggested improvements in communication networks, defensive systems, and even energy management for the palace. Many of the younger Valorians were fascinated by his ideas, eager to learn from someone who could think differently. At the same time, Daniel learned from them. He studied Valorian tactics, their traditions, and their philosophies. He discovered that the apparent coldness of their culture hid a deep sense of responsibility and care for their people. Understanding this allowed him to navigate the palace with confidence and wisdom. Through these exchanges, trust grew. Nobles who had doubted him saw the value of human insight. The court slowly embraced the idea that differences were not weaknesses but strengths. Amidst these efforts, Daniel and Saralith also prepared for the personal challenge ahead: their marriage. Though the council accepted the union in principle, the ceremony had to respect both human and Valorian traditions. Daniel had expected nerves, but as he observed the palace being prepared, flowers arranged carefully along the balconies, lights reflecting off the polished floors, banners symbolizing unity and loyalty, he felt excitement and humility. He had never imagined that a quiet human engineer would stand beside an alien princess, not just in friendship, but as a partner in life. Saralith joined him during the final preparations. "You look nervous," she said lightly. "I am," Daniel admitted. "But it is not fear, it's anticipation. I never imagined this would happen." "You have been extraordinary," she said. "You have faced trials, battles, and doubt, and you emerged stronger. Today is a celebration, not just of us, but of what we can achieve together." Daniel nodded, feeling a surge of determination. He was ready, not just for the ceremony, but for the life ahead. The day of the wedding arrived. The palace was adorned with flowers, shimmering crystals, and glowing banners. Citizens from across the Empire, along with the human expedition team, filled the hallways and gardens. The atmosphere was vibrant yet filled with solemnity and honor. The Emperor stood at the center of the hall, his expression solemn but proud. "Today," he announced, "we witness a union that symbolizes the future of Valoria, a future where courage, wisdom, and unity define strength." Daniel stood beside Saralith, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders, yet he was calm. He had faced impossible odds, won battles, and earned respect. He was ready to face whatever challenges came next, not alone, but with Saralith at his side. The ceremony combined human and Valorian traditions. Daniel and Saralith exchanged vows, promising loyalty, trust, and partnership. The crowd watched in silence, then erupted into cheers as the final blessing was given. For the first time, Daniel allowed himself to smile fully. The human who had arrived on Valoria as an outsider had become a symbol of hope and unity. After the ceremony, the celebrations continued under the twin moons. Music, laughter, and dancing filled the gardens and halls. Daniel moved through the crowd with Saralith, greeting guests and receiving congratulations from Valorians and humans alike. Some nobles approached with reluctant smiles, acknowledging his contributions and bravery. Others whispered quietly, still uncertain, but even they could not ignore the change. A human had become part of the Valorian story, and that story was only beginning. Later, Daniel and Saralith stood together on a balcony overlooking the city. The lights shimmered below and the stars above reflected on the surface of the palace waters. "We did it," Daniel said quietly. "Yes," Saralith agreed. "Not just the Empire, but us. We have shown that strength comes from unity, understanding, and courage, no matter where it comes from." Daniel smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. The journey from engineer to strategist, from outsider to partner, had been long and challenging. Yet standing beside Saralith, he understood that every trial had shaped him, every challenge had prepared him, and every choice had led to this moment. The future was vast and full of unknowns. Other threats might arise, other challenges might test the bonds between humans and Valorians. But for now, they had achieved something extraordinary. Daniel reached for Saralith's hand. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." Saralith squeezed his hand. "Together," she repeated. And as the twin moons rose higher in the sky, Daniel realized that he had found more than acceptance, more than victory. He had found purpose, courage, and a partnership that could change the course of history. The human and the alien vampire princess had not just survived, they had thrived. And in doing so, they had shown both species that strength is not measured by origin but by heart, mind, and unity. The dawn of a new era had begun. Humans and Valorians would walk side by side, united by trust, respect, and the extraordinary bond of Daniel and Seralith. The galaxy had witnessed a story of courage, loyalty, and love, and it would never forget it. And for Daniel, the quiet engineer who had once only repaired machines, the future now stretched before him as wide and limitless as the stars themselves.